Full Service Radio is proudly supported and hosted by Simplecast, the easiest way for a podcast creator to publish and distribute audio on the internet. For more information, visit simplecast.com. Recorded live from the lobby of the Line Hotel in Adams Morgan, Washington, D.C.
Peace, everyone, and welcome to the Edible Activist Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa L. Jones, broadcasting live from the lobby of the Line, D.C. This podcast is where dynamic people of color in the food and agricultural space share their personal food journeys, passions, and perspectives that stem from the land, all exemplifying the spirit of activism in their own edible way. Let's get started. So peace and welcome to the Edible Activist Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa L. Jones, broadcasting here on Full Service Radio. So another week not in the studio, but so thankful for technology that keeps us going as we rock out our interviews remotely. And just a big thank you and to our audience, and thank you for your patience in advance. But as always, we're bringing you great content and introducing our listeners to amazing people. Your support is everything. So, okay, guess who I have on today's show, everyone? Sunyatta Amen, who is the owner and operator of Calabash, the award-winning plant-based tea shop located in the Shaw and Brooklyn neighborhoods of DC. Sunyatta, affectionately known as Sunny, is a fifth-generation herbalist and the tea blend master, and so many more. We'll get into that. She hails from New York City, born and raised, where she started out at her parents' herbal shop, which we're gonna get into that in just a moment. So the herbs have always been in her blood, literally. When you walk into Calabash, you'll be hit by electric vibes, seriously, electric vibes, Moroccan-inspired decor, and how can I heal you today? Welcome to the show, Sunny. What a pleasure. Such a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Darling.
I appreciate being invited.
Yeah.
This is a dream of mine to come on and chat with you.
No dream. It's a dream of mine to have you chat with me, Sunny.
Oh, snap. Don't wake me. We're dreaming.
Yes, which is my jam, by the way.
That is a jam. Yeah, I knew you would know that one. Absolutely. You got to be grown. You got to be grown to know that.
I'm actually going to listen to that after the show.
Good.
Again, Sunny, thank you so much. How are you feeling today? I know we were chatting before, but how are you feeling today, girlfriend?
Most excellent. Yes. I am feeling excellent. I'm grateful to all of the tonic that I take every day. I'm grateful to my parents who used to give me golden seal all the time. And I was like, this is terrible. And now I'm like, yay. Right. So I'm just grateful that I, had the information and able to share information, and that we're doing fine so far. And this is important.
That's wonderful. That's so wonderful. Well, let's talk a bit about your parents and the golden seal that you were touching at a very tender young age in New York City, because from what I understand, and for our listeners, there are many folks who know about Calabash and many folks who have just met Sunny and her wonderful tribe. But for those who have not, this is your opportunity, and definitely want you to touch on, growing up in New York City and briefly, working at your parents' herbal shop and working with the herbs. Again, like I said, it's in your blood, literally, from a cultural perspective, but just at a very young age, being surrounded around, all the medicinal properties and learning and education, which is amazing and awesome. But definitely just want you to touch on that, because that is like the foundation of, pretty much part of the foundation of just Calabash and everything that you built. So let's touch on that briefly.
Yeah. It is definitively the foundation. I feel like when people ask me, how did I become a naturopathic physician or an herbalist or physician or whatever it is, and I just feel like I didn't have a choice. I think it seemed like I had a choice Um, but I really feel like I had been programmed secretly by the elders above me, and as I said, I'm grateful. Um, in those times when I was trapped in my mind, I was trapped in the kitchen with my grandmother or great grandmother or aunts, and they're talking to me about herbs and putting them in the foods, um, and my other cousins are outside like running around playing, especially boy cousins. I'm like, what is this? You know, how did he get outside? Well, you'll go outside soon, but do this first. And so um, it's funny because almost every single thing that I learned at their elbows, I have to say it was at their elbows, watching them do things is employed at Calabash. So everything that anybody has had here to eat or drink, whether it's a coconut curry chickpea soup or whether it's a kombucha or whether it's just like every single thing employs something that was taught to me. And I have either amped it up a bit because there are ethnobotanics that are available to me that may not have been available to my great grandparents and grandparents that come from other parts of the world, or just tweaked things just a little bit because Lord knows Caribbean people like their food fiery. So sometimes I turn it down. I know.
Yes, y'all do.
The Caribbean is just Africa and Asia East. It's the annex. So it's my job to make it approachable and meet people where they are, and that's one of the things I learned in my father's shops, both in Black Pyramid, his shops, herbal shops, and in Tree of Life, was to meet people where they are.
Wow.
It's like, well, you eat, these meats now. Let's get you to just chicken and fish. Okay, now you eating this. Let's get you to just so whatever that next step was, just trying to get people to eat more vegetables and fruits, even if they weren't committing to being vegan, because I mean, that's a huge commitment for a lot of people.
It is.
But we definitely could always add more. Let's add these herbs. Let's add this. When you're cooking, let's always eat the cure. So even when people come in the shop and young ladies are like, "Oh, I'm gonna have this, and I don't know if I should have mixed veg or I should have spinach or I should," and I'm like, "Well, how's your iron level?" I'm like, "Oh, nobody's ever asked me that when I went to go eat somewhere," and I'm like, "Well, eat the cure." So if you tell me your iron is low, and a lot of times just looking at the person, I can see that their iron is low, then I'm offering them, let's do this spinach, or let's do these collards, or let's do this kale, because why not?
Wow.
Same amount of chewing, at least you get the cure. Like always eat the cure.
I love that.
Always.
I love that. Now, and is that, and I love, because I mean, true words, man, when you say you just make it approachable, you walk into Calabash and I just instantly pick that up every single time I walk in. And so, being at your parents' shop back in New York City at Pyramid, is that like the same approach that you take? Is that what you saw coming up, and being in the shop with them? And how they had conversations with customers and patients and just everyday folks who came in for healing.
Definitely. My dad's first shop was 2 doors from the Apollo, and then 2 other doors down from Mosque number 7, which is where Malcolm X. A lot of people came out of that particular setting, and so in that context, my dad was Harlem born and his siblings, but his parents before him were not. And so what happened is you have like these first generation city kids who are divorced who still like what is called soul food, right? So the collard greens and the black eyed peas and the ham hocks and all that, but they're divorced from the places where the food is cultivated. So they are now eating it, but it's been 3 or 4 days on a truck, or it's not the same. It's not their parents' and grandparents' food. It's not the food of the people who survived the Depression. This is the next generation. So what happened is that the degradation in food quality, coupled with what my parents saw as all these billboards going up for cigarettes now that had Black and Hispanic people in the ads, Cool, these menthol cigarettes and Salem Lights and Virginia Slims. And so where you never really had people of color in those ads, there they were. And then more liquor stores, and then fast food restaurants started to become a part of the landscape in the early 70s, mid 70s. You started to see McDonald's and other things like enter the mainstream of inner cities. Mm-hmm. And so what happened is that even that one step, if I could call it degraded farm food, right, that wasn't as fresh as the parents and grandparents, even that was being challenged by this quick, hot dogs, hamburgers, corner store food, quarter water, like all and so like the dyes and additives and preservatives. So what they saw was that our very birthright to be healthy was being challenged. And the knowledge base that our Native American grandparents and African grandparents had was being wiped away. Like we were so disconnected at that point. Like maybe your parents had a little garden in the city in the tiny little front of their brownstone, but now the next generation didn't even bother.
Wow.
So by the 1970s, it was gone, and you have Vietnam in the mix of that. You have, and that relates in the way that the chemical companies, right? We're talking about like Dow and DuPont, created the deforesting agents like Agent Orange and these kinds of things, right? And then they started selling a lot of that stuff at home in different forms, right? Meaning in the U.S., that became the weed killer and weed eater, and they were pushing, these companies were pushing lawns, Mad Men, right? This whole Madison Avenue machine started pushing grass. Like you're not growing vegetables and fruits anymore, you're growing grass.
Exactly. Just to mow your lawn. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And mow your lawn and mind your business and pay your taxes and become a consumer. And so what ends up happening is that people were even further disconnected, and they're using these poisonous agents to deforest basically their lawn and yard. And so no bugs should ever be in your lawn, no dandelions, which is a huge medicine, right? No things that are so-called weeds. Oh, these mints, they'll take over your whole yard, pull them up. So all of the things that would have been growing are now verboten. And good lawn care and neat manicured lawns is the dream of every, boomer. And then we come to our next generation where we've inherited the lack of knowledge and understanding.
Say it again.
So what I saw growing up was my parents' approach, their desire to reach people, meet them exactly where they were. Hey, if you were a member of the mosque, and my dad knew Brother Malcolm, right? So if you were a member of the mosque and you decided, okay, I'm not going to eat pork, then it was his opportunity to say, here's the other things that you should also be aware of, and trim down in your diet, and let's lean on these vegetables, and let's lean on these fruits, and let's lean on these juices. And, so it goes hand in hand. And as a kid growing up in New York, I will say that vast majority of my friends, a lot of hip hop artists, and when I say hip hop, I mean the foundations of hip hop, like graffiti writers, break dancers, people on the mic, people who are DJs. So a lot of these very famous, MCs.
Let's be clear, right?
Real MCs. That a lot of these people who are very, still very famous as these foundational element hip hop folk, we were friends. And part of the reason we were friends is because there was no way that you could get knowledge of self, we called it, right? Where you start elevating your mind to, wow, I should want more for myself, or I have to help my community, or I need to be more aware of myself as a person of color, and still eat the food that is dismantling your mind and body. In most of that early hip hop, you'll hear references.
Yes, very conscious forward, absolutely.
Very conscious forward lyrics about food, from Tribe Called Quest to KRS to, I mean, you name it, Rakim, everybody, like all of these guys were all either Muslim or Muslim adjacent, or they were meaning like Nation of Gods and or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we all were friends because we all would go and listen to lectures by, very, very well-known lecturers. And we would go to my dad's shop, like people would come in and we all know each other. And so that generation, I think, has that knowledge and at least the desire to listen to that. What ended up happening after that, of course, is the influx in the inner cities of the result of the Iran Contra, situation. So you got the influx of you got crack as a way for them to fund their wars.
Right.
That's a whole
Right.
conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
saying all that to say that there are still some of us who held those beliefs, who still hold them, and Calabash is a result of that, is the resurrection of what my father and a lot of other folks, he was not the only one who were doing this work. And what I am aspiring to do is to create the people's pharmacy. So this should be as sexy coming into one of our locations. It should be as sexy as any other place you'd have a first date. It should be as attractive as any Starbucks or, so we are really giving people a third answer. It's not legal addictive stimulants in the morning. It's not legal addictive depressants at night. It's that middle. It's that other space. And so that's what our aspiration is. Because I got to tell you, my father's places were very Spartan. I love him to pieces, but his design sense is not by design sense. So shelves with a bunch of stuff on it, and it had everything you could name from A to Z, and it's encyclopedic, his knowledge. He's an ethnobotanist. He teaches at Yale. Well, he just retired recently, but that is very Spartan. And what I am aspiring to do is kind of blend those things. This should be a place that feels welcoming. You could have a first date. We have a lot of last dates in here too. You can have all kinds of.
Let's put that out there. And can I also put out there, whenever I walk in Calabash, I feel 1,000 times more sexy and even more sexier when I walk out. Okay.
You already were when you came in. So,
and that's so true.
But I think the idea of designing space for health has to also look sexy, because and people may, I just want them to wrap their minds around this, that the idea of looking sexy, and I'm not talking about the Kardashian, I'm not talking about any fake me out stuff.
I got you.
Just the wholesomeness of looking juicy and toothsome and sexy and attractive is all based in the proper balancing of your hormones. So when you say somebody looks attractive, it's because they have a little blush to their cheek. They have their skin doesn't look dry; it looks moist. Their hair looks strong. Their teeth look white. There's all kinds of things that sort of you scan immediately about a person that actually have to do with your health. And it's nature's trick to make sure that the people you see that you may procreate with or be attracted to or sidle up to, that you are getting the best seed in the best soil. It's a way of oh, that person looks sexy, but you don't realize that nature is really attracting you like a flower would. Ooh. It's oh, look at this beautiful thing, and you're just look at God, this is amazing.
Absolutely,
but it really
absolutely. Now, Sunny, do you ever? How often do you find yourself having to really, explain or explain the ancestral history that is connected to herbalism? Because just like, farming and gardening, how, we have millennials coming in trying to make this thing look sexy, and you're a mixture, when it comes to cultures. You're West Indian and, Native American, a mixture. And this is really
all the Indians,
all the Indians, name them, hit them, you hit them all.
Yeah.
And, this our indigenous communities intentionally, herbs were used for, to heal. There is a, so much historical context behind using herbs to heal. And so, how much do you find yourself having to explain that historical connection for those who want to glorify it as just this next trendy, cute thing to say that, oh, I'm a herbalist, you know? But like, are you really a herbalist? You know, because you Calabash and you and your team are intentional about the healing aspect to it. So how much do you find yourself having to really break
Fantastic
that
question.
down?
So that's a fantastic question in two parts. The first is that it's a new hip thing, and I find that, like anything, even health food, having grown up in a health food store, right, that it got gentrified. I mean, we're just going to call a spade a spade. I
Yep.
mean, like, if you go into Whole Foods, that didn't exist when I was a kid.
No.
Um, I Our parents' store was the store that the people came to. So, I mean, the idea that that can exist is actually exciting to me, because any platform that elevates the ability for people to get the food and or product and information is good. Now, here's the drawback. The drawback is it has to be affordable to the people. The next thing is, um, that in the course of the gentrification of it, somehow, I think we know, but somehow people of color were excluded as the innovators in this process.
Yes.
So sometimes a lot of times we have people come in and they'll say, I have a headache, or let's just give that example, or I have a headache, I don't know what's been going on, whatever. I ask them maybe 4 or 5 questions, because in my mind it's a scientific schematic. So, like, if it goes here, then it's this. If it's here, it's this. If it's this, it's like a computer. If yes, then this. Then 35 equals this, and then you know what I mean, like basic code language. And so, within 4 questions, I should be able to sum up what's going on with them. And after offering them something, and they take it like a tonic, and then they come back up to the register like 2 minutes later, wow, I've had that headache all week. I feel so much better. And I'm like, well, great, that's fantastic. And then the next thing is they'll say, well, I don't know if it's a placebo effect or what, but like I just feel better. So what happened is they feel better, and somehow the fact that what lives at CVS is greater than us still factors in their mind.
Okay.
So somehow all the medicine lives in CVS and none of the medicine lives anywhere else. And even though they walked in and they took it and they feel better. So what it really comes down to is, and I tell my staff this all the time, the people at CVS, the people at Starbucks, and I mean the hires up in these places, any place that you name, I tell them all the time, they're not smarter than us. They just have more money. And my staff starts to understand that as things unravel, and they are like, oh, they don't have the answer. And it's absolutely true. They're not smarter, and they're not more knowledgeable, because honestly, maybe 70%, 80% of the medicines, behind the pharmacist in CVS are predicated on natural medicine. And then it was mimicked in a lab, or even distilled from plant matters, wherever it is in the world, and then tried to be replicated. And I said, they're not smarter. They really are not. We are very clever, and we have to do things on a dime and figure things out very quickly for people. And it's just that they have more resources. So I take zero shorts. When somebody comes in, we have that conversation about a headache. They're like, well, maybe it was a placebo. I don't know, but I definitely feel better. I was like, well, and I say to them, quite frankly, our medicine works, and there's no reason to, discount it in your mind. But if you doubt it, go the next few days without it, and then let's see how you feel. And I tell you that 99% of the time the person comes back and they say, my headache came back. Can I have more of whatever you gave me?
Wow.
It
Wow.
happens.
So what would you say are like 5 herbs that anyone should just have on a regular basis in their home?
This is a great question. I wish I could have just 5.
I know, Sunny. I know it's hard. I know.
Oh, it's like, oh, my favorite boyfriend or husband. They all had their things. They all had something about them.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, even if you had to put them in the trash bin, you're like, oh, I still liked it. But I will say that for me, there are some herbs right now specifically that I think are very important that people may not be paying attention to. And are you talking about things that they're growing or things that they have?
Things that they can just have. So we have some folks who are growers, and then we have listeners who aren't. So for those who aren't growing, what can they just go out and grab, or if they want to start growing them themselves, because herbs are pretty easy to grow.
Depending. We'll talk about that.
Okay, depending. Thank you for correcting me. She said, Sunny said depending. Okay, not all herbs. All right.
It's
like
not,
a bajillion of them too.
Right. And like any plant, you could kill it. But let's, oregano is on the top of my list right now. Believe it or not.
Someone actually just recommended oregano oil on just a regular. Okay,
yes.
so that's okay.
So it's one of the things that we have behind our bar. My staff takes a squirt of that in water. So if you're making like a little 1 ounce squeezy bottle kind of thing, like a little pump of like a little glass 1 ounce, putting just 10 drops of that oregano oil into a 1 ounce of water, and then shaking it up and spraying it right in your mouth.
There you go.
Right into the back of the throat.
Okay.
In your throat. The throat. Spraying it right in, and maybe 4 or 5 sprays, and swallowing that down. It coats the throat. Which is really where we see viral load accumulate, and that's where it starts. And that's typically with any cold or flu, or you'll be like, oh, my throat is scratchy. That's your first sign. Like, I have itchy or scratchy or sore throat is your first sign that you are getting sick. And that's because that's where they lodge, entering through the nose or the mouth or the ears, and like going right into the throat in that warm environment and incubating. So squirting that right into your mouth, oregano is an amazing antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal. It's just a killer. And it's a shame to me that people only use it. But after this, they won't. But it's a shame to me that people really only use it when they're cooking so-called Italian food or Mediterranean food. And I'm like, well, that's the only time you see oregano, and it's dried beyond belief in a container, and you shake it on. And I'm like, I don't feel like that's even oregano. I feel like you could just peel the label off the outside of the bottle, and you would have had more nutrition than eating what was inside of there.
There you go.
So oregano oil is fantastic. If you want to grow it, I think it's an amazing plant to grow.
Okay.
Oregano, just like the next one that I'd recommend, which is basil.
Okay.
And
basil.
in terms of the kind of basil, I would grow holy basil above all others.
Okay.
Holy basil is not the same as Italian or Greek, like the sweet basil, and it's not the same as lemon basil. Holy basil is a completely different flavor, and it's available medicinal, is completely different. So I would recommend it. So like oregano and basil, peppermint, rosemary.
Yes. Ooh, love rosemary.
And thyme. These coincidentally and not so are all mints. sometimes when people are growing, they're gardening, they don't understand the subcategories, but all of these are mints.
This is
So
my first time. I love. Okay, I'm learning. I did not know that.
yeah,
Thank you for
lavender is
teaching
a
me.
mint, holy basil is a mint, thyme is a mint, basil is a mint, oregano. Um, you can name almost any, sage is a mint. So almost any culinary herb
Okay.
is going to be in the mint family, with the exception of things that are in the alum family. So those are things that are like garlic and onion and chives and leeks. Those are in that lily family. They're a different class, but otherwise, all the other stuff is mint. And so the great thing about mint is that it typically does grow well and it wants sun, and it contains all of those contain different levels of menthol, but every single one of those is going to really help with bacteria, with fungus, with like peppermint in particular is great for cooling fevers. It's a fever reduction tool in herbalism that works really really well. Um, Holy basil, I think, makes a great tea and lemonade that also boosts the immune system,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's one of my like go-tos for that too.
Oh, I want
um,
some right now. I want
I
some right
feel like
now.
I have a bunch right here that I'm looking at that I wish I could give you.
Of course you do, Sunny. Of course you do. Why wouldn't
There's
you?
a bunch of boxes.
So,
I cannot tell you how many people come into the shop. We talk about herbs. I have asked them to come in, like, hey, we do classes.
mm-hmm.
And I've been like, hey, why don't you come one day? Because they asked me about the stuff that's in the boxes. And I'm like, why don't you come and we'll walk through? I would love to walk you through these plants and show you the difference between chocolate mint and peppermint and spearmint, and so that you learn to recognize the plants as you see
Absolutely.
them. And they're like, oh, I'll come and do it next time, or I don't have time right now. I don't know. And then I cannot tell you, I'm sitting on top of at least 300 to 400 emails from people or direct messages asking me to please identify plants that are in their yard,
Oh
or
my
they want
goodness.
me to tell them how to identify things and show them how to grow them. And I love that we're now interested. I'm sorry that it took a crisis, because I
Yeah.
wish that we had already been, gardening those things.
And you know what? At your Brooklyn shop, because I
Mhm.
remember last time I was there, don't you have some of those herbs right outside of your shop, right?
Yeah,
We,
we have more than
oh my
250
gosh.
medicinal herbal plants outside that
Oh
come
my.
from many different places in the world. Lots of things are local, that are in this, what I will call Algonquin territory, to use Native American terms. Like this
Okay.
is
Okay.
that northeastern region of the United States are natives. I like growing native plants, but then
Mm-hmm.
I do also have some things that I sat next to me on an airplane coming here,
Oh
like
goodness
years
gracious.
ago. I'm like, he's got a seat, I have a seat. So there are medicines that are not available here, but they are because we brought back some babies and we were determined that people should be able to have those too.
Wow. Sunny, you have been in the entrepreneurial space for a very long time. And I actually remember when you had your belly dancing
Hmm.
business a while back.
Yoga and
And,
belly dance studio.
say
Hmm.
that again?
I said yoga and belly dance studio for many years.
Yes.
Um, yes. And like I said, it's just a remodel, a reinterpretation of what
Mm-hmm.
my parents were doing. My dad had next to each of his herbal, juice bar, tea shop, was a sporting goods. And so they owned both places. And so the sporting goods was like, tennis rackets and classes in
Mm-hmm.
this and so and so that and bikes and whatever, because he figured the same kind of people who wanted this also wanted that.
Wow.
So it to me was just a reimagining of, okay, well, we have sexier space, and then what people want now,
Oh
and
my
what talents do
gosh.
we have that we can bring to bear for physical movement, because medicine isn't just the stuff you drink
Absolutely.
and the stuff you take. The movement is a medicine too. So what can we give
Absolutely.
people that will motivate them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Being in, as a Black woman navigating a Black woman with all of these beautiful mixtures, I'll say, and navigating, the food and beverage space, especially in DC, because we see what's happening, what has happened, what continues to happen. What else? And I know there are many answers to this, but what else is missing from this space for women of color operating businesses, trying to pursue their dreams, lift off a business such as yours or something comparable? What is still missing from this space? Because it ain't all there yet. There's still more work to be done.
I appreciate your question, because there are many tables that I don't have a seat at, which is fascinating. Over the years has been fascinating, because I am, without bloviating, multi-generational business owner, and also, in what I do, right? I'm a fifth generation of what I do. And I find it fascinating that people, by virtue of sex or lack of skin color, or whatever it is, are able to leapfrog over us. Yeah. So it's not just me personally. It's not like I'm taking an affront. It's just flabbergasting that people with less experience, less know-how, and like I tell my staff, they're not smarter than us. They just have more money.
Exactly.
That they're able to get, restaurants built. They're able to get, a whole bunch of other stuff done, whereas we have no resource tap, and we don't have necessarily the ancestral wealth to say, okay, well, I'm going to just call my uncle, Saul, and be like, hey, I need 50 grand, or can all of you get together, all the uncles and all the people who know the uncles, and then if all together I'll have enough to do what I need to do. We may just not have those resources. And sometimes those resources are not available because our parents may have had, and grandparents, a know-how of what they were doing, and they gave us that. But they're also on the front lines. I mean, both my parents were Black Panthers. It's like they willingly, and these are people who, they went to NYU, they went to Columbia, all of that. They willingly decided that this is what they wanted, was to be of service. So when we talk about service industry, or food and beverage service and service, where's the service inside of a service industry?
Wow.
When it's only self-serving. So they're not employing folks because like, it's the right thing to do. It's just like, let me give my restaurant on H Street a real hip and cool look by employing all these young Black kids or whatever. Or let me give it this sneaker culture, or let me do this thing, so it's like throwing in and borrowing all of the things that belong, so it's like all of our rhythm, none of the blues. So you've got to sometimes take a step back and like, why is there not something like a Calabash on every other corner? Or why does this restaurateur have 7 restaurants and nobody's sitting in 5 of them? And how do they do it? How are they writing off these losses? How do they do it? When you really look deeper, like, this is very interesting. And we're determined, of course, to do what we do. And my job is to educate my staff and customers and make sure my staff is at the helm of whatever comes next. So if we move into, and our plan is to move into a model of manager/franchise for the people who've been in here and really, really been learning, like I did at my grandmother and great-grandmother's elbows, right? Learning at my elbows, that they can carry the helm of what happens next. And based on what's going on in the world right now, they are some of the most important people.
Absolutely, Sunny. Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
All it takes is one set of, you're only one grid shutdown from total chaos, right?
Absolutely.
Like you're only one electrical grid, one set of supermarkets closing down, or the shelves being empty. People lost their minds already about that. And to be frank, I have been a prepper for years. I know people, my friends used to laugh at me. Other people like, what is wrong with you? But I saw already the mismanagement. And because of my parents, that self-determination we grew up with, it's like, they were like, don't ever let the supermarket be the only place you have food, or you don't have medical supplies at home, or you don't know how to address stitching up a wound, or you don't know how, like it's just, that is part of self-reliance that came out of that movement of
Mm-hmm.
the
Yes.
middle 60s and late 60s, especially in cities like Chicago and New York and
Mm-hmm.
Oakland, and where they're like, we're not going to let the government try to take care of us. They don't. And we saw
At
that with
all.
like things like Katrina and other disasters. You see it in Puerto Rico. You see it in, like, anytime people of color or certain sets of folks are in need, it's not going to happen for you if you don't do it for yourself. So being an herbalist at home is important. Knowing the difference between being a master herbalist and being somebody who has a little garden and whatever is a difference. And so it, of course, requires education. But I think everybody can start today.
So powerful. So powerful. Ah, so powerful. Well, I do need to wrap up in just a few moments, but I'm not shutting out the show without talking about your amazing talent for interior design, Sunny, because a lot of folks don't know that you did pretty much what the majority of the design work at both of your locations,
Oh
if not
yeah.
all of it. And oh my gosh. I mean, I'm talking like building stuff, actually building stuff and the fabric and everything else. Like you're a melting pot of everything.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's also, I have to give nods to like my architect,
Yes.
Wanda, who's a Black woman who,
Oh,
is
shout
like,
out. Yes.
yeah, she's like, let's do this. And it was the easiest working relationship with an architect I've had in like 25 years, because we just understood what needed to be done and move forward in it. And I was like, Black women save the world every day.
Yes,
She
we do.
saved me so much nervous energy. I loved it. And
Mm,
what I will say is that part of that self-reliance is, if you are waiting for somebody to come and save you, it's never going to happen. So you have to learn. We have to learn, like, how do I make this happen? How do I build a countertop? How do I mix concrete? How do I, like, it would behoove us at this moment in time to start learning how to do things instead of living in a disposable culture. That is the underpinning of what you're doing with edible activism, and it's activism in general. And is,
mm-hmm.
how to be self-reliant is the first key of activism,
Wow.
because you are allowed to divorce yourself from a system. You're
Yes,
allowed
you
to say,
are.
what? I don't need to go to, West Elm or here or there. Like, I could actually build this thing, or I could make this thing, or I could put money in the hands of someone in another country
Yes.
who needs it
Yes.
directly, instead of paying a middleman. And so, even our planter boxes that you mentioned that are outside were built
Mm-hmm.
by the children of the Idea Charter School here in DC,
I love
because I
that.
wanted to put the money in the hands of that program so they could buy more supplies for the children instead of going on Amazon and ordering boxes, which could have been there the next day. I worked
Mm-hmm.
with the kids on the design of these so that this is what we needed. They're so proud of those boxes. If you really take time to look at them next time you come here, they have signed them. Those
Oh
boxes
my
are signed by the kids
gosh.
because they were so proud of making it. And I invited them to be able to come and look at the herbs and see them in action. And that makes a difference in terms of inspiring young people. And that's where any activism should always be aimed, is at the next generation.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So, how did you, and before, because I'm going to ask you a few rapid fire questions,
Mm-hmm.
what inspired your interior designs at both of your locations?
That's a great question. They're like a amped up version of my house. So I would say,
Whoa.
if you, this is on 10, it's inside of these spaces, probably on 11. And if you turned it down to like 4, you'd probably be inside of my house. So
Okay.
it's an amped up version, because what I wanted is what I grew up with. My aunt's an artist, my uncle's an artist, my mother's is an NYU theater grad. Like,
Hmm.
all I grew up with the idea that theater is also a healing mechanism, or art. So this is the result of being the child of artists. I can't
I
take
love
credit
it.
for that. And so what they taught me is that if someone walks into your space, whether it's your home or your business, and they immediately feel relaxed, half the battle is there. Like,
Wow.
because it's such a stressful environment we live in, especially in inner cities. If they
Mm-hmm.
can relax, then the healing can begin. Then we can start a conversation about the next sets of healing that are needed physically. And so, anytime somebody tells me they enter the space and they felt better in whatever
Yes.
way it is,
I know I
then I
have.
was like, awesome.
I know I
Then,
have.
woo, wow, goodness.
I
Then we
have.
don't have to pull it all out. I'm glad. Excellent.
Oh
We
my
have done it.
gosh. Where can folks find you? Like how I know these times are crazy and for those who, aren't in the DC area, those who don't have Calabash at their proximity and obviously, we're not able to walk physically into the store, like where tell folks like where we can find you online and how we can like truly support you, especially even more during these times during COVID-19.
That's a great question. I appreciate that.
Of
So we're
course.
online on all social media platforms at Calabash Tea. So whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, um, one of the greatest ways to support us is by ordering product. We love exchanges of energy. That's what we call it at the register when people are coming. It's not one way support. We're going to exchange energy. And so if people go to calabashtea.com and they would like to purchase packets of tea or superfoods or different things, we do our level best to send the highest grade product with the most loving frequency out to people so that
Mm,
they can get the medicines that we've been taking for years. And if anybody knows our staff, they know that, like, they always say, they come in and they're like, wow, how do you guys manage never getting sick? Like, we just never get sick in our shop. And it's because of the way that we constantly do what we do. It can't be a one-off. And so we want to help the community at large, the nation, the people, everyone listening, just to help up your immunity, up your nervous system support, because that's part of what will kick the legs out from under your health. And so we're just here to make sure that that happens.
and listen, Calabash is in itself the immune booster of the city, in the
Oh
city,
man,
okay?
I
Seriously.
appreciate that. We're going to
Seriously.
do some stuff online, so if people want to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, etc., with how to plant different things and how to recognize medicine. I have city walks where I'm just walking around that I've been filming for a year or more, where I'm like, look at this medicine growing in the crack of the sidewalk, and so people will learn how to recognize it, take a cutting, pick it up, put it in your, get it home, rinse it, wash it, flip it and reverse it, put it in your own
Yes.
garden, and
Yes. Back
get
it
it
up if you
going.
want.
Back it all the way up, boo. Back it up.
Oh, Sunny, I love you. Oh my gosh.
Well,
Just
I
such a
really
wonderful
love you. I
ball energy.
appreciate you.
Yes,
I
yes,
appreciate it. And what you're providing is an important service. People need to be, the key word of activism is active. People
yes.
have to, like, do something. You can't just listen to this stuff. Now there are
Absolutely.
directives, and I appreciate you for that.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'm not letting you go without a quick rapid fire. Are you ready
Oh,
for me?
word. I hope I
Word.
am.
All
Oh
right.
man,
Okay,
I'm
girlfriend. All
sweating.
right.
Okay,
What
go
is
ahead.
your favorite veggie?
Eggplant.
Nobody's ever said eggplant. Okay. Okay for the
Because they don't
eggplant.
know. They
They
don't
don't be
know.
no. All
In
right.
in Jamaica, we call it garden egg.
Garden egg. You know what? I did know that, but I
Hmm.
forget. Okay. Thank you for the reminder. Garden
Yeah.
egg. All
Hmm.
right, girlfriend. Favorite fruit?
Jackfruit.
Oh, I love jackfruit.
It smells like sex.
Oh, hey. All right
It's very
now.
sexy.
All right. Sweet, spicy, sour, salty, savory, or bitter?
Bitter all day.
Yes. All
Bitter.
right. Last
Or
question.
as
One
Jamaicans say,
bit.
bitters.
You better serve that native tongue. You better serve it.
Hmm. Yes.
One action step someone can take today towards edible activism.
Plant something.
In her words. Sunny, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Here for you. Amazing
It is my
tribe.
pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you and
Yes.
what you're doing. And anytime I can be of service, let me know.
Oh, you're going to be back on the show, honey. Don't go too
Uh-oh.
far.
Threaten me with a good time.
All right. Peace, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We are here live on Full Service Radio every Wednesday at 11 a.m., where you can catch today's episode on fullserviceradio.org, as well as iTunes and Spotify. Be sure to follow me at Food Talks in Color on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Are you an edible activist? Sure you are. Come join me on the show. I would love to feature you. Just shoot me a DM on the gram. Peace and blessings all. And remember, there is no culture without agriculture.